According to my clock, it is 10 o'clock, so we'll get started with our virtual creature feature today. Today, we're going to talk about our amphibian friends with Battle Creek Outdoor Education Center, Clear Lake Camp. So I'm really excited about them today. We have live animals, woohoo! Live virtually, of course, but it'll be great. But I would love to introduce our speaker today. We have Matthew joining us today, as well as John from the Battle Creek Outdoor Education Center. And they have a lot of friends joining us today as well. So I'm going to hand it over to them.
Excellent. We are glad that all of you are here today, and certainly we're excited about sharing these creatures that we have found on our property, as well as talk a little bit about characteristics of our amphibians. So I'm gonna share my screen as well, and we will make sure to get time for questions. So we are located on M37. We are part of Battle Creek Outdoor. We are part of Battle Creek Public Schools, and we are a place where school groups from all over southern Michigan come. Sometimes come for, some groups come for a day, other groups come for an overnight stay up to about a week. But we work with a lot of different groups, as well as not only just schools, but other rental groups as well that come and use our site. And like Ellen was saying, we do have virtual classes. In the last year, the past school year, we haven't had any school groups on site, but we still are able to work with students as they come. And we're looking forward to, if you were able to join us in December, we have our Screech Owl, and we like to explain, I like to show off and teach about those animals as well. Our class today is about amphibians. Amphibians are these amazing group of creatures that have a double life. Double life mean that they're young, the young stage, can look very different than the adults. Amphibians here in Michigan consist of frogs, toads, such as this spring peeper, as well as salamanders, newts, and other related creatures. And here is our one, that's our eastern tiger salamander. Some general characteristics about amphibians. They are vertebrates, so they have a backbone with internal skeleton structure. They are ectothermic, and we're going to go look at a few more pictures about this to describe that. They are smooth skinned, so unlike some of our reptile ones, they don't have scales. This is really important because that smooth skin, the skin, allows them to breathe, which is amazing adaptation, but it allows them to be susceptible to some pollution in the water. And then they have this complex life cycle. So they change from when they were juveniles to adults, and that process is metamorphism. And to compare a little bit about these ectothermic versus endothermic. Endothermic, they have to, a creature has to use lots of energy to maintain a certain body temperature. And ectothermic, an animal uses just enough energy to power its body, to move about, to digest food. And so in this picture, we are just showing that an endothermic creature uses a lot of energy compared with an ectothermic creature. Two examples, here's our bird and our frog, and our screech owl is fed almost every day of the week. Whereas the salamander that we will show you, or say a frog, is fed 2 days a week. So our salamander creatures, our frogs, they eat a lot less than the warm-blooded creatures, maybe a bird, people that eat every day. And certainly for my case, I eat many times a day. So keep that in mind. But the interesting thing is that the ectothermic creatures, so frogs, their temperature depends upon the temperature in the surrounding environment. Here's a pictures that John has taken of some of the green frogs that were found on our property last year. That this is our picture of our life cycle, that it starts off as these eggs, and these eggs are found in a lot of jelly, that they are found in a pond. We have them in our pond, maybe our lake, but in a wet environment. And in a couple weeks, they become tadpoles. The tadpoles, with this green frog, the tadpole might actually, or the green frog might stay as a tadpole an entire year, so over winter as this tadpole, before it starts to change. It will become then this froglet, and then become an adult as well. And here is just a picture to show the individual changes as it does happen last summer. That it starts to grow these hind legs first. One is still a tadpole, and the legs go and get a little bit bigger. And after the hind legs develop, then the front legs develop as well. And there's still that tail that are there, but the last step in that changing process is that the tail disappears as well. And after the tail disappears, then it looks like an adult frog, what we are used to seeing as well. And here's our picture of our froglet. Its body looks like an adult frog, and it still has the tail on it as well. There it is, it's our frog. Well, let's take a look, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna stop sharing. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take a look at some of the creatures that John has found in our pond. And takes a couple of hands to be able to do it. Here it is. We're going to start off with our tadpole. Things I want you to see about with our tadpole. Still has this tail. There is. And we collected it this past week. So this tadpole overwintered in this state. It was overwintered in that. If you were to come out here, maybe you're like ice fishing and brought out something and drilled a hole, you could actually take a net and come in here and probably collect some this tadpole. And there it is, moving a little bit. Looks and moves a lot like a fish. It's using that tail.
Matthew, this is a tadpole of what particular species, and do all tadpoles get this large?
We think that it might be a green frog or a gray tree frog. And some tadpoles, depending on the species, might get bigger, but there's other tadpoles that might be a little bit smaller. We're going to look ahead to a spring peeper, and the spring peeper tadpoles will be smaller. Great tree frog. So there's a question, is it a bullfrog? Our best guess right now is green frog, or possibly a gray tree frog. Oh, and there it is. It looks like it's eating a little bit as well. Huh, that's pretty crazy. Able to see it eat. Nice thing is, you can see the mouth in front. And here are their eyes. Their eyes are on their side of the head. What do they like to eat?
Tadpoles like this will eat almost any kind of organic matter they can get in their mouth, whether it's algae or tiny insect larvae or anything like that. They kind of nibble on just about anything they can find in the pond.
Yeah. I want you to take a look. Here's the eye. It's down on the side of its head. And its mouth, he said it moved a little bit like the fish. Mouth is definitely similar to its fish. It looks like it's got, once you see there's a little bit of white on the underbelly. Yeah, it's moving around. And it hasn't started to develop those hind legs or that we see. But it is moving around, and they're found throughout the grasses, hiding in some of those vegetation.
They are very good at hiding. These guys, their main defense is to, when they get startled, they will dive down to the bottom of the pond and kind of dig their way down into all of the muck and the weeds, and they're perfectly well hidden down there.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions about our tadpole? Feel free to type it in the chat if you are joining us on Zoom, or feel free to type it into the comments if you're joining us on Facebook.
Can we hold tadpoles?
It's similar to holding a fish, where you don't want to keep them out of the water too long. And especially if you don't have anything on your hands. If your hands are very clean, it's probably all right to hold one for a very short period of time. But if you have anything like bug spray or sunscreen or anything like that on your hands, you don't want to touch them, because they can kind of absorb some of those chemicals through their skin, and it's bad for them.
How big can tadpoles get? We think of this one. I'm looking at it. Looks like about 2 inches. Bullfrog tadpoles I've seen get bigger than this one.
Yeah, the body of a bullfrog tadpole can get approximately as big as a ping pong ball, and then you've got his tail coming out of that. So they can get pretty big.
Other questions? Thanks for these questions. Yeah, these are good ones as well. Yes, yes. We think that they're pretty cool as well, especially to see those the big bullfrog tadpoles. Is there a frog that's smaller than the baby?
I don't believe so. Do you mean if the adult frog ends up being smaller than the tadpole? There are strange things that happen in nature, but I have never heard of that happening.
Well, I think that maybe depending on, I'm thinking also the length of the tail.
Possibly.
What do they smell like? When I smell them, I smell pond water. Yeah, how long are tadpoles in that state before the tail starts shrinking? Depends how long the life of a tadpole is. The tail starts shrinking once those front legs start to develop. And with we're going to look up here, a spring peeper, they complete their transformation going from tadpole to a frog in a year. So they will complete it pretty quickly. There is a frog called a paradoxical. Okay, hey, nature.
That's a good name. Paradoxical frog.
Paradoxical frog that is smaller than the tadpole. Wow, thank you for sharing.
All right, do you want to switch?
Yeah, let's switch. All right, excellent. So we're going to move over.
There's a question of how heavy is that tadpole?
How heavy is a tadpole?
Bet if he was in your hand, you would hardly feel it. They're extremely light when they're this small.
Yeah. And this is our spring peeper. Things I wanted to point out. It's about an inch big, really, really small. Good. And if you look closely up on top, you can identify it two ways. One, looks like it's got this X over top of it. And hopefully you can see just this X pattern. And that's one way to see these. But the other way that we were able to identify that because it was calling. So right now, spring peepers are one of the first frogs to be loud in the spring, start calling, and this is a male, and it was starting to call for some of those females. This is about as big as the spring peepers get. So they are quite small and impressively loud. The eyes, so on the tadpole, the eyes are on the side of the head. Now the eyes are just up close to the top of its head. And this is where, and that's our ruler just to show that it's about an inch in length. This is where you might typically see a frog close to a pond, just its head is out of the water. And the rest of the body is underwater, so that very few animals will be able to see it. Its nose is out of the water, and with this one, it's breathing pretty quickly. We'll say here. Yeah. Oh. We wanted to show on the bottom that it had these toe paths on it. It out of the pond, it's able to climb pretty well, and that's because it's got these really sticky toe paths on the bottom. So there's a question, nice question. What did peepers do during the rest of the year? Survive. They try to eat as well. I know I have seen some of the spring peepers actually out away from the pond, which was surprising. Some of them, I've seen some of them sometimes around our orchard or in the forest, and they're good at climbing. And they are trying to get enough food so that they can survive the winter.
There was a question of what do they eat?
They will eat what a lot of frogs have very similar diets, and they eat things like bugs, insects, maybe spiders, worms, any of those little kind of critters that you might find out in the woods, especially if you flip over a log, types of things that you might find crawling under there.
Do you want to talk about what they do in winter? Their maybe frogsicle tendencies?
Practical sentences.
They do have many frogs, especially ones that live in places that get really cold, like Michigan. They have bodies that are able to get very cold without freezing. Because when you think about ice forming, it forms in crystals, and those crystals start to grow, and that would be sort of like having millions and millions of tiny ice blades forming inside your body. So it's very important that they do not freeze, that their blood does not actually freeze when it gets very cold. And that allows them to avoid the types of injuries that some other animals would have if they got down to a freezing, their body got down to a freezing temperature. And many frogs will either partially bury themselves or even just lay at the bottom of a body of water, like the pond or the lake. And they can be kind of nestled down in some of maybe the dead leaves that are at the bottom. And since they have that very thin, moist skin that is able to absorb oxygen, their body is slowed down so much that they get enough oxygen just through their skin. So they can stay underwater and absorb enough oxygen just through their skin to be able to make it through winter. Some of the other ones that spend more time on land, like toads and things like that, they often will find hiding places, like they can tuck themselves away in between some good tree bark, or they can find a nice hole to crawl into, or something like that. So that generally in winter, they become almost entirely inactive and they'll hide away.
I know wood frogs will have almost like antifreeze in their blood, so they can kind of freeze and almost seem like they're frozen. Do spring peepers also have that?
I don't know 100% of all of them do. It wouldn't surprise me if the ones that kind of live in the same sort of environment do.
I think they do. I think peepers
believe they
and
do.
wood frogs do.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
yeah.
it's a level of glucose in their blood, and they have enough of that that it acts like antifreeze, and it prevents their blood from totally freezing.
Yeah. Okay, because certainly I've heard of that about the wood frogs. They're pretty amazing. We have okay. Anything else about our spring peeper? Hopefully everybody has heard these.
Yep, like Matthew said, these are one of the first ones to start singing in spring. And they have those toe pads that allow them to climb even on the smooth plastic like this, similar to other tree frogs, like the gray tree frog also has that same type of adaptation to be a really good climber.
Ah, nice. We're going to move on to our green frog. And that actually goes with our next question. It says, what's the biggest frog? The green frog and the bullfrog around here are some of the biggest frogs. Right now, this frog, it's still growing. So it's just a couple inches long, but we think that this is a green frog. Identification features. I was going to point out this green upper lip, and it has, as well as there's a ridge, and the ridge extends just beyond the eye, and it goes down the back. And those two features allow us to identify that this is a green frog. Green frogs, sometimes there are lots of different colors of green. Sometimes they're lighter green, darker green, and they could actually become almost to a really dark, nearly black color. The eyes, like this, are up top, allow it to be able to have the body down in the water and just look up. This one is sitting on a stone that we can see, and it's right up here, so it's facing us. Nose is at the front, and it's breathing, so the tadpole, it had the gills, it could breathe underwater. These frogs have how lungs allow it to breathe air. And there's those things, and there's also these eardrums, right? behind the eyes as well. The eyes stick up, which are typical things. Other features, it's got some great markings right around the throat, and we can see it breathing in pretty well. It's out of the water. Oh, look, the rest of its body is moving as well. And oh, how big is this frog? We're going to show you with the ruler, and it's we can see this is the hard part about. I would say about 2 inches, 2 inches in length. It's good.
If he was to stretch out.
And if it were to stretch out, it would be a little bit bigger. Oh, we saw those legs. It has those really long legs that are really great for both jumping when it's on land as well as swimming. And it just jumped over now into the water. And it's looking like it wants to escape, to move out. It's moving around. But it's got the web feet that allow it to swim really well. There are those really, really long legs.
There's a question about what they sound like.
The green frog actually is really easy to tell if you hear one of those. I haven't heard any singing yet this year, but they sound almost like if you had like a frog guitar and you just plucked one string on that guitar. They sound very much like you're plucking a string on an instrument like that. It's a really cool sound and very distinct from the others.
I like to think of it as, think of Kermit the Frog with his banjo. This is a green frog. Kermit the Frog is green. Kermit usually has a banjo. They kind of have similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great way to remember it.
Nice. Great. Are moving around. So with these frogs, they will sometimes hide. Oh yes, well you want to talk? I was thinking the feet. So unlike the spring peeper that had the toe pads, this one doesn't always have those toe pads, but it is really good at hiding close to the edge of a pond. And when you walk by, it can stay extremely still. The only time you see it is when it's hopping and jumping into the water. But it just has its head out of the water, and it's looking around like what it's doing right now. And they're pretty hard to see until they start jumping. When it does jump into the water, one of its defense mechanisms is that it goes into maybe some aquatic plants, and it will hold its air for quite a long time. This is, we said, about 2 inches. They can grow a lot bigger than this size. Oh, and it's just going up and down. How long have frogs been around? Ooh.
Well, amphibians were one of the first animals, even before dinosaurs, to really kind of grow very large and become like apex predators long time ago. And they were not frogs, but they were amphibians. What you would think of as a modern frog, they definitely have been large prehistoric frogs. Exactly when those began to form, I'm not 100% sure on that. That's something probably to look up. The fun thing about the fossil record is that we're always finding new fossils and always kind of changing our timelines and changing our understanding of when exactly the types of animals we have today first formed. But amphibians themselves were older than dinosaurs, or they have been around longer, And they got a lot bigger in the old days than they are today. And they filled some of the same roles that very large animals do today, like crocodiles. Imagine a giant salamander with big sharp teeth waiting by the edge of the river to catch any animal that wandered by, the same way that really big crocodiles do today.
The number that I have, it says modern amphibians appeared approximately 200 million years ago. Long time. I got, yeah, and it's sitting back on its perch. And there it is. Yeah. Definitely breathing air.
You said you haven't really heard the green frogs yet, but what frogs have you been hearing out at the Outdoor Education Center?
Mostly spring peepers and chorus frogs. So I've heard.
I've heard some other croaking that I haven't totally identified yet. It doesn't sound like the green frogs, even though I know they're out, and it doesn't sound like the peepers. So I'll have to look into that and see what else we've been hearing out here. Definitely peepers, and then one or two others. I have not heard bullfrogs or green frogs or gray tree frogs yet.
I know chorus frogs are out at the Institute. If it kind of sounds like if you rub your fingers along a comb idea.
Yeah, it's probably that actually. I bet we've got chorus frogs as well, although I haven't seen those nearly as frequently around here as some of these other species.
We do have a question in the chat. Do the adults have lungs like people? What about the tadpoles? Do they have gills?
Yes, tadpoles breathe in the water like fish do with gills, and the adults do develop lungs and breathe out of the water, but they can also absorb oxygen through their skin. So they kind of have a couple of different ways of getting oxygen into their blood.
It looks like it has webbed feet. Yes. Does gray tree frogs have webbed feet?
They do, but they also have the toe pads. So they have a little bit of both. They're maybe not quite as good of a swimmer as green frogs, but they are a lot better climbers. You see these feet right here.
Really good for escaping.
Did you want to move on to our side?
I think, yeah, we could move on to. You
can see these really nice markings on this guy and just how well that would blend in with all kinds of hiding places in and around ponds and lakes. It's got lots of spots and stripes and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Great for breaking up his outline and blending in.
Someone was saying last spring they heard lots of spring peepers. Is it too early this year, or is it because it's so dry?
I don't know. I do remember hearing those spring peepers as well. I was thinking that it was just because I was more focused on the outside environment. We'll have to look.
I know I've heard a lot of spring peepers. It just depends on where you are. And so maybe certain places that they would normally visit might be drier this year, but I know in other places I definitely have heard spring peepers this year.
Yeah, and they also sometimes begin certain behaviors a little bit sooner in one area versus another. So maybe you still will get them. It'll just be a little bit later.
We have found some spring peepers. Yep, nice. You found some wood frogs.
So who do we have here?
So our next creature is our blue spotted salamander. And this one we can find, it's a type of mole salamander, mole being that when it's in the terrestrial form, it is typically found underneath a log. Two purposes. One, where it was being able to keep its skin moist, and then that is where it finds a lot of different types of creatures. And these salamanders and the frogs and toads, yes, that they are endangered when there is pollution in the water. We talked a lot about the skin being permeable, and so that this will, so all the pollution could impact that it's could get in to the body, and that's why frogs, toads, other amphibians are just considered like indicator species. So if the frogs and toads in the area are doing pretty well, then we can say that the environment is healthy. But if you notice that there's a decline in the frog species, it might have to do with some pollution in the water. I like this one. This angle is great because you can see the blue spots on that salamander. And there's its 2 eyes, and it's got the 4 limbs as well. Our salamander is looking pretty healthy. It doesn't have to go out and hunt for its food. It is fed twice a week. It eats crickets. So unlike the other creatures that we have shown, this is the one that we have kept and has lived with us a number of years and was also found on our property. And there it is. Moving as well, and I'm looking at the 2 eyes, and its body is covered just a little bit with some of the bedding material. How do these salamanders hunt? They eat, so in terms of what they eat, they're eating some of the insects or maybe the worms, the grubs that live in the log. There it is. If you'd imagine this log being overturned, it's gonna hunt for those creatures that live in this decomposing, decaying log. This is a really good time of year to, actually earlier, to see those these types of salamanders. Oh, nice. We might have, we're going to get and show you a picture of the types of salamanders that we have here in Michigan. Yeah, we showed the picture. There are 3 types of salamander species that we have here.
There are 3 that I've seen personally. There's quite a few more that live in Michigan. Many that I have not seen around here that are either live in different kinds of areas or just are pretty elusive. So some are common enough that you'll see them, and some are very difficult to spot unless you know exactly where to look. I don't know exactly the number of how many we have here, but there's quite a lot of frogs and toads and many other salamanders and newts.
I believe we have 12 frogs in Michigan. Some are endangered and threatened, and 12 salamanders. And again, some are endangered and threatened, like the marbled salamander or the smallmouth salamander.
Yeah.
We did have
a siren in Michigan.
We have, oh man, I don't remember how many right now. Yes, we do, but I don't remember how many.
That's one of the ones that I've never seen. I would like to.
There is a question of how common are they and where are they found? They didn't hear it previously, if it was stated previously, in terms of the blue-spotted salamander.
Oh, okay. So with some of the blue-spotted salamanders, where are they found? I can tell you that they, for most of the year, that if you look underneath logs, you could find them underneath logs, underneath. This in March, they come out because they like the frogs, they need to go down to the pond to lay eggs. And because they are some elusive, that it is hard to figure out where they are. Last month, in one evening after dark, I was walking home and I found one of these blue-spotted salamanders that was walking towards the pond. And because they are, it was overnight, that would be typical. So it's hard to, of course, hard to know exactly how many they are. But that was one of the first times. The other time that they are found and where are they found in terms of going to a pond, sometimes in March, late March, after a rainstorm, you could see that that rainstorm sort of is as an indicator that these salamanders, will and eastern tigers salamanders will go towards the pond, towards that process where they will lay eggs. Yes, salamanders will have a similar life cycle like frogs. They will this time of year they have laid eggs. They will hatch. They'll form the larval state. Their tadpoles are similar. The only thing that makes them unique and to me quite interesting is that many will have external gills, and then they'll change slowly and become these terrestrial creatures. Do salamanders have the same breathing mechanism as frogs do? Yes. Oh, nice. So we have a western lesser siren, but it's very rare. And these are very similar to salamanders. Ooh. Oh, so they only have two limbs as well. Yeah. There's some. Oh, there it is. Ah. So maybe around, probably wants to go under something. When we have it, this is our carrying case. In the cage where it actually stays, it is most often found underneath its water dish, underneath some pieces of wood, and it just stays there. It doesn't move around, doesn't move very often.
Yeah, and salamanders like this, like mole salamanders, Matthew mentioned, they're called mole salamanders because they dig. They have these very strong limbs and they can dig little tunnels, and that's one reason why you may find them under logs. But under those same logs, you may also see tunnels. And so you might have a very healthy population of mole salamanders, and you would almost never see them because they spend most of their time hiding underground, in the mud, under leaves, and under logs.
So would you say that this is the best time of year to potentially see salamanders, maybe?
Probably very early spring is when they're moving around a little bit more between their normal terrestrial homes and the bodies of water where they need to lay their eggs. Most likely, yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Say no.
If anyone else joining us on Zoom or Facebook Live has any other questions, feel free to type them into the chat. But I know you also have some more information for us just on amphibians in general.
Yeah, so we're just going to go to our slide. Yeah, switch back, but of course we are still monitoring the chat. And I believe there's. Let's see if this does. Okay. Ellen, can you see that picture of the froglet? Yes, yeah.
I can. I also still see the salamander instead of your shining faces, which is not a horrible thing.
We thought it was pretty good view. Yeah. All righty. So let's move this. So here's our picture of our froglet. We're going to get back to saying there was some question about how big they are. And with this picture, we just wanted to show this difference in sizes. The hand is the same size. On the left, this is our picture of our bullfrog. And on the picture on the right is our picture of our gray tree frog. So frogs like these ones here in Michigan vary due a great detail in size.
Although this gray tree frog is not as big as they get. This one probably just finished his metamorphosis when I took this picture. So this one is very small. It is in its full adult form. Though they do get bigger than this, they don't get anywhere near as big as that bullfrog.
There was one question about how many and what type. Here are some of the ones that we have seen on our property, and there's other frogs that are native to Michigan that we haven't seen. We talked a little bit about the great tree frog and mentioned how great it was at climbing. One of the other great things about the great tree frog is that it can change color. It can camouflage in with the background. So great tree frog on a tree that's climbing the tree, very dark brown. And then on the right, here's another great tree frog. It's sitting on a leaf. It has climbed up and is on this leaf, and it has turned a green color. And another great tree frog, it's hiding on this cement wall, and it has turned a gray with a little bit of splotches as well. This great tree frog is hiding in the apple orchard, something near and dear to me, and it is because it is in full sunlight. It has turned a very, very light color, and it's one of the lightest colors. So it can, one of its mechanisms is camouflage. This picture, what I wanted to show you was that it has the topaz as well, and this allows it to climb. And they're quite good climbers. And this is our zoomed in picture to show just how, it's a zoomed in picture of those topaz. We talked a little bit about salamanders. Here are the salamanders that we have seen on at camp on our property. We have this blue spotted salamander. Earlier, we've seen this last month, we saw quite a few eastern tiger salamanders and the four-toed salamanders. And last month, yeah. Any questions?
There was a question of how do the toe pads work? Do they have adhesive on the bottom?
These tree frogs, you would think that they would work very similar to a gecko. They have very similar shaped little circular pads on the ends of their toes, but they actually work very differently. You can see that these have little kind of like pentagon shaped sections that are extremely tiny. And then there's other forms within those that actually create extra friction. And then they have what is called wet adhesion, where they use something that's kind of like a mucus, like a sticky, liquidy sort of mucus material that they have on their toes. And combination with these extra friction from the little forms and that mucus, they can stick to just about anything. They could climb a glass window if they needed to.
Here is a frog that's just waking up from hibernation. You can see the little bit of mud that's on that. And it looks like the eyes are a little bit half shut, a little bit half opened. I'm imagining when I'm just waking up in the morning, a little bit groggy. This frog is a little bit groggy after waking up from a couple of months of being inactive. So maybe you could see if you look for the mud on some of these. And eastern tiger salamanders. We talked about their mole salamanders during much of the summer. They can be found underneath logs. That's where they're living. And they've got lots of different types of a pattern. So it's a black body and then the brown on it. And what makes them unique is that, each creature has a different pattern of these brown spots on them. So you can identify which particular one.
Some of their spots can be kind of more brown, like that first one you saw. Some can be orange, like this one, or even kind of yellow. So they can have some variation in their color as well. It wasn't this last Friday, but the one before. So maybe a week and a half ago or so. It was after the first rainstorm that we had once the pond had completely thawed. And I went down in the morning and took some of these photos. There were tiger salamanders down there and they were breeding. There were quite a few of them that were in the water. You can see how big the tail is on this one. It's just about as long as the rest of its body. Although they spend most of their time as adults out of the water, they are very good swimmers once they're in the water, swimming similar to the way an alligator or a crocodile would, kind of moving their tail left and right, side to side. And you can see this one, how it kind of tucks its arms in when it's really swimming, but they'll kind of crawl around on the bottom as well. And these ones were, like I said, they were breeding. The water was quite cold. So even though these are ectothermic or cold-blooded animals, they're still able to operate in pretty chilly weather.
These are such cool photos, John. We did have a comment. Our education director at the Institute did say she finds it very interesting that your salamander species are pretty different than the ones that we have at the Institute, because we have very few tiger salamanders and four-toads, but we have more spotted, red-backed, and blue-spotted than anything else. So it is interesting, even though we aren't very far from each other, we do have some pretty different species, which is awesome.
Yeah, and I noticed that too. Like you get some turtles that I've never seen around here, and definitely some salamanders and things. So even though we're really not very far apart at all, it's interesting to see the variation and how some prefer certain areas over others. And as that same day, as I was leaving the pond, I found this one on its way out from the pond, heading towards our prairie and towards a more forest area. So this one was probably finished breeding, and it was heading back to its terrestrial home, wherever log or tunnel it was heading towards. Once they're done, they head out, and they probably will not return to the water again until next year. Sometimes not even then. An adult salamander won't always breed every year. If we look, this is a shot of some of their eggs. You can see the little dark spheres inside what is usually very clear, kind of a gel coating. And they usually attach those to vegetation under the water, kind of keeps them anchored there. And hopefully that keeps them a little bit safe too. They seem to prefer the area near our boardwalk, possibly because of the shade or because it kept them a little bit more hidden from anything that might be coming in from above. But there's quite a lot of these clusters of eggs out there. I saw maybe 6 salamanders, and there's a lot more than 6 clusters of eggs. So there were probably quite a few more of them that came and went in different areas of the pond. And before I even got out there were probably several that came and went. So I believe we're going to have a pretty healthy population of little baby eastern tiger salamanders this year.
That's so cool. We just have a couple of minutes left. I do want to say there were some other comments in the chat. One person was saying maybe we have different types of salamanders because at the Institute we have some more moving streams, whereas at Battle Creek Outdoor Education Center, your wetland is more like a pond. So maybe it's the type of habitat that we have, which is a cool way to think of it. Oh, I love seeing that tadpole. There was a question about how far do these salamanders move in their range? Do you know at all on that one?
I'm not 100% sure on the actual distance, but similar to things like salmon, we believe that they will return to the place where they were born in order to lay eggs. So they can travel, probably, I don't know exactly a number, but probably a bit farther than you might expect for such a small animal. Similar, I guess, sea turtles, we believe, do the same thing. They will travel quite a distance to return to the same place where they were born in order to have their own babies.
Awesome. And I will let you end on the note of this really cool picture that you have here up if you want to comment on that, because we're almost out of time.
Well, we hopefully will see some of these salamander tadpoles. I like this picture because it shows the external gills, and here it is in this pond. And I think the nice thing about it is we'll just be able to hopefully get outside and look, and who knows what we'll be able to find. Go outside and look for those things, and you might be able to see some things. That's our message.
Thank you so much. I learned so much, and it was fun to watch them really move around. Yes, John, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh no, just it's great that we can actually show some real live animals, and you never know what they're going to do.
Thank you so much, John and Matthew. It was really fun to see these salamanders and these frogs in all their different states, and go outside and learn more about them, listen for them. This is the time of year to really hear them. So, especially the frogs.
Yeah.
Salamanders not as
Yeah.
much, but
It'll be a little bit harder.
yeah, it'll be a little harder. So, all right, well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks for everybody for
And
joining us.
Have
Thank
a
you.
great week. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.